and structure have had a very, very love-hate relationship across the board. And so what I have found most often is that you can bypass a lot of the need for structure when you have a highly empowered and equipped team. Right. And so that sounds weird, right? Because how do you get structure, right? How do you have a highly empowered and equipped team? Well, that structure, it helps for there. So you can't, it's not, I'm saying you can't completely avoid it, but you know what kind of teams don't worry too much about their structure when you're seeing them on the court, like a basketball team, right? Like they're not worried about like, did I time block, all that kind of stuff. They get on the court, they operate, they organically work. I think about the slime mold. You guys may have seen the slime mold that recreated the entire Tokyo subway system from scratch, something that took civic planners 50 years to do. It's able to recreate in just a matter of days without anybody directing it, without all those different things. And so the idea is that so much of what we're trying to do, what we talk about structure, here's what I say: bureaucracy is manufactured trust, right? So the only reason why we have bureaucracy, why we have policies, is to create artificial structure trust, right? And so if we could all, as human beings, perfectly trust each other from the beginning, right, the first time you met somebody, we would never need another policy. We would never need a bureaucracy because I would just trust you. Now, obviously, that's not realistic. We live in an imperfect world. People have different, stuff. So we can't ever achieve perfect 100% trust. But what I have found, especially, and the reason why I'm so passionate about teaching leaders how to delegate delegate to their teams, is that 90% of your stress, 90% of your, efforts, all the different headaches that leaders have can be solved by just trusting your team. And so much leadership content is about getting other people to trust you that we forget to tell you, oh, you can also trust them. Like, you can lean into them, you can give them there. And so there's no greater passive income hack than a team that you can trust and delegate things to and focus on the things. So that's kind of the different thoughts and different lines of a swirl that's got me, down this pack. I'm just like anybody else. I get caught up in the productivity hacks and the biohacking and all that kind of stuff. And all that is fun. I love it. We'll probably talk about it here. But there's no hack that's better than having a team you can trust.
Super, super cool. And I mean, just maybe to shine some light on the psychological workings of it as well, why do you think it's so difficult to trust your team? Or why is it like not the first instinct that we all have, but like, why does it seem to be like a challenge we need to overcome?
So here's what's super fascinating. Trust is actually the default. And so that's what people don't realize, is that I'll break it down like this. So you guys may have seen this before, but your brain consumes 20% of the calories that your body intakes, right? So your mind is the highest calorie burning organ in a specific day. If you were just to do nothing all day long, your brain would consume 90% of all the calories 20% of all the calories. Of that 20% calorie intake, the vast majority of that calorie burning is done by your prefrontal cortex, which is that.
Sorry, I muted you, Michael. My mistake.
Sorry about that.
I was about to say.
Yep. So prefrontal cortex, big part of your brain, that consumes most of the calories that your brain consumes. And that prefrontal cortex is where all your executive decision making happens, right? So when you're actively thinking about something, that's happening in your prefrontal cortex. So making a decision is the highest calorie burning activity that your body does. And so your body doesn't like doing it. Like if it can avoid to make decisions, it will do that. And so leadership, the reason why we create leaders in our hierarchy is to delegate decision making, right? When you have a leader, I no longer have to make the decisions that the leader's making. That's why I've delegated it up from there. And so your followers, people who are working with, all of our different colleagues, they're looking for someone to make decisions on things. That's why the first person that suggests where to go to lunch is where everybody goes to lunch, right? Because now I don't have to make the decision. Somebody already made it across the board from there. So my point is that trust is the natural default. You want to trust people. And if you have kids, you see this, right? When they're born, when they're babies, trust is their default. They don't question things. They don't push back on all kind of things. And so what happens is that we learn distrust, right? We learn distrust when we have pain in our lives, when past trauma happens, when we violate that kind of motivation of like losing things, we learn distrust. And so what I always tell leaders is that your team wants to trust you from the beginning. If they stop trusting you, it's because you're doing something to cause that distrust. And so rather than focus on how to get a team to trust you, instead focus on how you can remove barriers to trust, right? And how you can work on that instead.
I think this is a great bridge to one of the questions that was submitted before the circle, actually, which is a lot related with like transparency and how you share information. So one of our community members asked, how can I ensure that my team understands my plans for the day or the week? And also, how can I enable them to make their own plans with their own contribution? So it's kind of twofold, like how to get them to actually contribute the right plans, but at the same time, how to make plans clearer.
Yep. And so I'll give you the theory, then I'll give you the quick tool, and I'll try and do this in 5 minutes. So theoretically, every group has 2 questions that they're answering. Where are we going? How do we get there? In a perfectly optimized system, the leader answers the question where we're going, and the rest of the team answers how we get there, right? So you think of a ship like a classic pirate ship. The captain determines where we're going, but the rest of the crew figures out how to get there. And so when you have those 2 buckets, it becomes very easy all of a sudden. And that's why I think the OKR is such a brilliant tool when you use it well. The point of the OKR was to create mutual buy-in, right? The idea is that the leader sets an objective, and then the rest of the team sets the key results. What are we going to track in order to get us there? And then every single week, the leader's asking, how are we doing? And then the rest of the team says, this is what we're doing. And so that you can continuously learn, right? And so I think a lot of people got caught up in things of like, do you set goals that you can accomplish 100%? They got caught up in the optimizing that they missed that the whole purpose of the system was to create a formalized set of rules for the team to play together, where a leader can say, hey, this is what we need to do. This is the direction we need to go. And the rest of the team can sound off, okay, this is how we need to get there. This is the results I need to track. This is how often I'm going to check in. These are the initiatives that I'm going to tell you I'm going to do in order to accomplish those results, and go from there. So that may be the shortest that anybody's ever explained an OKR before, but that's why I love that system practically to go from there.
Cool. I thank you for that. I wanted to highlight the question from Dimitri, which I think it relates to the previous part of our conversation, but it's really interesting actually, which is how to resolve a situation where leader does not trust the team member. How would you go, or like, how do you go about that?
Yeah. Gosh, and I'll probably send, Daria, I'll send you emails. I've got actually like a kind of an outline of if I had prepped a little bit, I'd have it, I'd pop it up, but actually I have like a figure that kind of outlines where distrust comes from, like the 4 different barriers to trust. And so what you got to do is you got to identify where that barrier is. And so one of the ways I looked at in my doctoral research is there's 3 things that every person needs in order to be well adjusted to your team. And so 3 things. Number 1, they need role clarity. Number 2, they need self-efficacy. And number 3, they need acceptance. So role clarity, do I know what I'm doing? Like, what do I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it? What's my role? Self-efficacy, do I feel like I have the ability to actually do it? And then the third thing is acceptance. Does the rest of the group connected to me? Am I connected to it? Am I part of a network where my actions actually matter? And so that's one place adjustment is across the board. And forgive me for time, I don't have the rest of the list right in front of me, but adjustment, right, is one of the places where people start distrusting their team. Is I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, or I don't feel like I can do it, or I don't feel like my actions actually matter. People are connected to me. And so as a leader, your job is to probe and try and find, where is the distrust happening? What is happening? That's what your one-to-one is what's going on. And I was literally in a situation the other day with someone in my downline. We're dealing with a cultural problem that keeps coming up over the last couple of weeks. And she always couched it in her team, right? So my team is feeling this way, my team is feeling this way. And I literally said, hey, I love that you listen to your team, but we've been around this horn a couple times and your team isn't in this room. It's you and me. Why do you feel this way? As the leader, what's going on here? Why do you feel this way? And so it what it ended up doing is bringing back a whole bunch of stuff that had to do with more her past experiences than actually the circumstance the team was dealing with. And we were able to talk through it, right? And again, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not asking you guys to deal with people's trauma, but it's, you have to understand what she, what she articulated really was this idea that her role had never been clearly understood. She doesn't understand, and really it's not just her role, she wasn't feeling accepted by the whole organization. And so I had to show her different levels, and we created a plan to kind of go from there. But that's just one example of what your job as a leader is to do, is to continually probe, find those barriers, and then go from there.
And actually not only in people around you, but also in yourself. Like, why do you not trust this person? What's behind it? So what I'm hearing is basically kind of go deeper, try to introspect around 5 whys or whatever technique you're using in order to understand, why is the trust on my end lacking? Is it an issue of lack of clarity? Is it because they don't have the skills? Is it because we don't have the relationship, and so on? So really interesting. Cheryl is asking, OKRs make sense. Finally makes sense. We struggled with creating them. It was hard when it was created bottom up, when it really should be top down. This is super interesting. I actually can relate to that question. Can you shed some light on, from your experience, and also how you understand OKRs, what's the right kind of dynamic between bottom up and top down?
Yeah, and that's, to me, the OKR is not top down or bottom up, but it's the first partnership group. Like, we're going to make them together. And so the two line, right, is you as a leader need to have a vision of where we're going, right? So you got to know your mission, you got to know the overall vision, you got to have a strategy, right? If you're a founder, this is where a lot of founders get tripped up, is they keep making the revenue is the goal, right? But revenue is a lagging indicator of you actually doing something in the world. And so if you don't have a strategy of what you're trying to do, right, if all your goal is to maximize revenue, everybody's going to get caught up doing 100 million things that actually don't matter, and you won't grow revenue. And so what I work with my executive advisory clients is that vision. You got to have that clear vision of what you're trying to do. What does your organization look like 3 years from now? What is it? What did you accomplish? What did you go from there? You paint that vision to your team, and then you say, okay, that's 3 years from now. What happens between now and then? You guys tell me. What do we need to track? Where do we need to go? What needs to happen? And immediately what's going to happen is people are going to start firing off. It's like, oh, well, we need to grow our social media account. And that means we need to be tracking engagements, or we need to be tracking number of posts that we're doing in a week, and seeing how all that kind of stuff. Okay, how many posts are we going to do a week? Well, I think we should try and do at least 10 and try and ramp it up to 50, right? That's the magic that you get to have as a leader that motivate them, right? You painted this vision, and then they fill it in. And so OKR is one way to do it, right? Like, you don't have to formalize it. There's a lot of apps, and that's where I think people break down with OKRs, is they want boxes, right? And this is where 100 million SaaS companies come in, and they're like, we will help you perfect your OKR. And it's like, no, I don't. I need a mindset shift of my team that says that I don't have to figure out how we get where we're going. I just have to be the champion of where we're going. No SaaS software is ever going to fix that for you. So that's how, and fix that dynamic if you don't build that with your team. So yeah,
I think lots of the questions we've gotten beforehand had to do with kind of making space for that thinking that you just referenced, like actually having capacity and focus to even understand what your vision is, and making that work. So let's talk about that a little bit. What to do if you feel overwhelmed and can't move on any of the strategic stuff, and you promise to yourself you will every week after week, and it's just not happening, and you always end up in the day-to-day work, the rat race. What to do?
So here's something that brought a ton of freedom to me. I'm a little bit of a history nerd, sci-fi nerd, so I love like time travel, space travel, all that kind of stuff. But something that I learned in I was reading a specifically book is called The Discoverers by Daniel Borstein. It's not a leadership book, it's a history book, but I highly recommend everybody check it out. The first time that the hour existed, right, that the hour even existed, was like 1615, the year 1615. It was the first time someone divided the day by an hour. So think about this: the entire Roman Empire, all of it, rose and fell before an hour was ever even a concept that people had. There was no hours. There was no, I got a time block here. I got to arrive here at this time. I have no course. Literally, the Romans conquered the entire world, built these massive cities, all these structures, and never even knew what an hour was. The only way they divided their day was noon. And the only reason they divided it at noon was so that lawyers wouldn't talk all day long and eat up their entire day. That's the only reason why they created the noon. So they told the lawyers, hey, you have until noon to say whatever that is you want to say. And after that, you're done talking. That was it. So time is relative, right? This whole idea of time is relative. You can bend time to what you want and bend it to your energy. And that's what we're discovering now a lot, right? These things, if you're a Huberman fan like I am, you know that there's this thing called the ultradian rhythm, which is your 90-minute work bursts, right? And that 90 minutes, you can use them almost any time of the day that you want, right? But you only have a couple of them. So how do you use them? How do you burst into them and all that kind of stuff? So that's what I say right off the bat is bend time, right? And so all the constructs that we understand about time was created during the industrial era when everybody was trying to box tick things and turn you into robots. That's what it was for, right? The whole idea of time blocking, coordinating, all that kind of stuff was to reduce you to robots. And I'm not going to say it wasn't good. There was a lot that we are able to do now that Romans weren't able to do. But at the same time, you have to think of yourself as an organic creature, right? Where are my energies at? What are the times that I'm the best at? What are the type of tasks that I'm best at this time of day? And throw out the structures, right? The idea that you have to do everything in this 8:45 to 5 p.m. box, right? Equally divided up with an hour in the middle. All that is bunk. If your best creative time is after the kids go to bed late at night, stay up, right? Stay up and do it. Knock it out then. If your best time is in the morning, wake up and do it. If your best time is in the middle of the afternoon, right before lunch, stop accepting meetings during that time. Tell everybody, put a giant block on your calendar. I need this time for that. So that's the shift that I've been making a lot is how do I think strategically about my energy and what kind of tasks I match to my energy, and kind of go from there. So a little bit.
How do you, this is super, super insightful. And I can only recommend Huberman's podcast and all resources to everyone here. Maybe Maria Curtis can help me share the link in the chat. But how do you actually notice where your prime zones are, and how can you help your team to discover the same? What are like the tools on experimentation?
Yeah. So the number one thing that I look for is when I don't notice time anymore. So, and that's what I've even been doing, trying to get to. If you find yourself, so procrastinate, what we know now about is that procrastination has nothing to do with laziness. Procrastination is a result of three things. Number one, fear, not three things, two things, fear or boredom, right? So those are the two reasons why we procrastinate on a task. Either we're too scared of it, meaning we don't feel like we have enough efficacy or tools or resources to get the thing done. So we avoid it because we're afraid of it. Or on the other side of it, it's boredom, right? So it's either too easy for us to do, so our brain doesn't like it. Your brain likes to work in that sweet spot of just enough challenge and work, but not so much that it overcompensated. And so look for yourself and try and match those kind of tasks. When you can do a task and not notice the time, when you look forward to a task at different times, that's how you work for it and kind of go from there. And that's how you start matching. So then you just keep a journal, right? Then you start writing things down, or you note it, you say, oh, I want to know. These are the things that you start asking your team about in one-to-ones, right? How many of you guys have seen so many different one-to-one agendas, right? Everybody and their mother will sell you a one-to-one agenda. Here's the 6 critical questions you got to ask in every single one-to-one. At the end of the day, one-to-one is all about investigating and finding these things out and helping your team find those things. And so if you make that your goal for your one-to-one, the rest of the structure just helps or enhances that on that part. Sorry, soapbox on that part. Yeah.
Super, super, super helpful. Dimitri asked a really good follow-up question. What about the lack of motivation when you start on something? Is that boredom, or what is it? What is up with that? Is this fear of failure? What do you think is happening there?
Yeah, lack of motivation again is two things. Number one, the task isn't challenging enough, or two, the task is too challenging, right? It's too scary to actually get started. And so if it's not challenging enough, you got to ask yourself, why am I doing it? If it's not a challenge to you, if it's not critical, right? So things that you know are gonna it's why we wait to it's why everybody waits till the last minute to do their taxes. But when you need to do your taxes, you get it done in like 2 hours. And you're asking yourself, oh, why did I wait so long? Well, because there wasn't enough motivation until the time became the fear, right? It's such an easy task to do, or not quite easy, but it's such a scary task, all the different stuff like that. And then the time forces you to do it on that part of it. So you got to kind of manufacture those things out of yourself. One of the things that I do for myself when I'm found myself lack of motivation is I will set like a 5-minute timer to start something, especially if it's like a stretching task, right? So I'll go, okay, I'm just going to start working on this for 5 minutes. Usually after 5 minutes, I'm in it and I'm moving forward and I don't need the rest of the time. All of a sudden the alarm goes off and it startles me. I'm like, oh, I forgot the timer was over there. Unless I'm looking forward to the end of that timer, in which case that's the massive signal to myself that, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. Either somebody more skilled should be doing this, I should pay somebody to do my taxes, or I should delegate this off my plate to someone on the team. I should trust someone else to manage this. So
super interesting. We have time for one more question. If anyone wants to drop one last one, I'm going to squeeze one in. What are some common pitfalls? Also, one from one of our team members, community members, actually. What are some common pitfalls in delegation that leaders should be wary of, especially in a tech startup environment? And how would you recommend working around them?
Yeah, and you forgive me. Obviously, I don't have tech experience, so I'll just talk from general team things, and you guys who work in the tech world can contextualize it from there. Number one, again, the three things that I talked about: role clarity, self-efficacy, and acceptance. If somebody is dropping a ball when you give them a task to do, 9 times out of 10 it's because of one of those three things is out of place, or more than one of those three things is out of place. They may across the board, and it's foolish to think that a single onboarding process is one and done, right? I can do one onboarding and all of a sudden they'll know their role clarity, they'll know their self-efficacy, and they'll be accepted. Those are things that you continually manage as individuals grow, change, and adapt, right? And so, what once was a high-powered individual, all of a sudden they start slipping, and it's because they're starting to question themselves. Maybe I don't like this role anymore. Maybe I had a couple bad experiences, recent experiences, maybe different things like that. And so you're constantly, as a leader, probing those things. And those are the questions you ask yourself when a mistake is made, right? And so that's what you're trying to figure out is, okay, did they know what they were supposed to be doing? Did they feel like they could do it? And did they feel like it mattered to the rest of the people? Or do they even care about what the rest of the people think? If they've gone the other side on the curve, right? They're no longer got chemistry. They don't care about making other people mad. They don't care about making you mad. This may be somebody that doesn't need to be on the team anymore, right? And you got to move them on that part of it. And so delegation should be a very easy, or I shouldn't say easy, delegation should be a natural thing for you to do, right? It should be a natural thing that you step out. And so it's all about removing those barriers to making that a natural flow is what your job is as the leader.
Thank you so much. It's been really, like, time flew by. I didn't even notice. Oh my God, it's already half past. But it's been really, really insightful. And I feel like I could toggle in all of those topics that we just kind of touched upon more. So I highly recommend everyone do follow Michael on TikTok, Dr. Michael Steiner. There is a few more kind of deep dives on each of those topics. So you explain it super nicely in the video. So definitely super, super cool resource. And toolkit. Thank you so much for spending this noon with us. And I hope you don't have any lawyer calls that are going to take too much of your time today. But yeah, wish you all the best for today and this week's productivity still. And thank you so much for spending, sharing your wisdom and spending the time.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm also going to drop my email in the chat. So if anybody on this call, if you guys want to deep dive anything, or if you've got more questions, shoot me an email. I'd love to connect with you.
Super cool. Thank you so much. And oh yeah, there was a question about Instagram. Are you actually Instagram? I don't even know. I just follow you on TikTok.
Instagram is just, you got to pick one platform and go from there. And I just don't have as much fun on Instagram as I do on TikTok. So there I'm at.
That's fair enough.
Yep.
Roshan, I think that means you need to join TikTok now because it's worth it.
Yeah,
Thank
looks
you,
like it.
Michael.